Hello all, welcome to the Community Engagement and Volunteering Office's second installment in our Community Speaker Series. We are in partnership with the Center for Gender, Race, and Area Studies, which we are very grateful for. And we're working today with Lesa McWalters from the Worcester Refugee Assistance Project. So Lesa is one of the founding members of RAP, beginning originally as a volunteer and then as a board member in 2009. She became executive director in 2017 after graduating from Worcester State with a Master of Science in Nonprofit Management. Working with refugees from Burma has been inspiring and humbling, and Lesa has enjoyed the friendships she has developed with families over the years. Lesa lives in Millbury with her husband and has 4 grown children, 2 granddaughters, and has sponsored a child in Uganda for 15 years. Lesa, take it away.
Great. Hi, everybody. Okay. So I'm going to start my presentation today. I'm going to show you the outline here. I'm just going to give a little short history of what RAP is and why we exist. And then we're going to talk about what the difference is between a refugee and an asylee. A lot of times you hear those two words mixed, in the same sentence. And then also between migration and immigration. And then we'll get to the heart of the discussion, which is, why are there refugees from Burma? And what is the current refugee status, in the world, in Burma, United States? And finally, how can you help in Worcester? And then we'll go to questions. So how did RAP begin and what do we do to help refugees in Worcester? So starting in 2008, the Burmese people that had left Burma and left and went into Thailand received refugee status, which means that now they were able, since they left Burma and they were in Thailand, they were able to get a refugee status, meaning that they could go to a third country. So during that time, President Obama was in office, and he made it clear that he wanted to help those refugees right away. So he set what they call a refugee cap at 150,000 for refugees specifically from Burma. And that would be over the course of, his first term in presidency. So of those 150,000 refugees from Burma that came to the United States, about 1,500 of them resettled here in Massachusetts. And then of those, about 250 landed in Worcester. So during that time, between like 2008, 2010, there were a lot of refugees coming to the United States, not just from Burma, although 48% were from Burma. The other countries were Iraq and Bhutan and Somalia. So as you can imagine, with this vast number of refugees coming to the United States and also specifically to Worcester, the social service agencies were just overwhelmed. And in particular, the Burmese refugees were the most vulnerable and most disadvantaged group of the refugees coming here, mainly because they had no concept of urban life, we'll say. So they were farmers and hunters and fishermen, growing rice, in the countryside, and they really had never seen or experienced any type of Western civilization, we'll say. So I want to, before I get into other things, I want to share with you a story. This is Pawa and her husband Puku and her 3 boys. And they were one of the first families that we met here in Worcester. They arrived in 2008. I'm going to let her tell her own story. This is a documentary that was made in 2014 about her experience coming here and what her life was like in Burma. And then we can, you'll get a sense of why I'm doing that. And then we can talk a little bit more after that. So I'm going to ask that the video clip start.
And where they tell me I will go, I had no choice. They sent to Massachusetts, Worcester. 2 months, 3 months, we don't know people. We have to learning to open. He had to learning across the road. You know, when letter came to house, we don't know how to read that, how to do. Very difficult here. We had not a lot of money. The government had a month 800. We have many problems with the water pipe broken. Oh, a lot of water and hole. My fastest favorite. After World War, after England came, then many missionary help my people. That's why many current they go to Christian, but Burmese is Buddhist land. Many friends, many villagers we love. My brother too. The soldier, they have power. They have power. They can do everything. We are farmer. We have to afraid people. Government, government. They had gun. We had no gun. We grow rice. We cannot eat rice. This is my brother. This is my sister, and this is my auntie. He feel the chicken. Yeah, my niece, they play soccer. No shoe in Burma. Oh, this is C3, my session, C3. Session C3 here. Oh. In my camp, now 50,000 people. When I live in refugee camp, I woke up hospital. A lot of disease, malaria and typhoid. My kid get typhoid fever. Oh, I was very ill then. My people is very difficult because they had no education, knowledge. Civil war a long time. My life look like now change, and in Burma look like water. Oil and water we cannot mix. Very different. Many people they stay in refugee camp, they not apply. Oh, they afraid to come to America. We stay in bamboo house. We never see car. Oh, they know speak English. Oh, we have to go to America. We're afraid that, You like America, not easy. Not easy. When I came to Worcester, not like this, no clothing, no furniture. Oh, I don't know that. That's why now new refugee came here. I try to help what they need. Like they need winter coat, like we have to teach everything. How to open stove, how to use the refrigerator, how to use the light. People have to teach like that. My room. My younger boy, they want carton. Mm. In my pastor's son room. Oh, my husband, he had to carry heavy weight every day. He was too hard. Sometimes he like, oh, he want to go back, go back to Burma. When we better, somebody not better. I want to get education, and then I want to help people like people help me.
Okay, so let's see. Can you see my screen again? Okay. So, like Pawa said, it was very, very difficult when 250 refugees came from Burma into Worcester, and right at the end of summer, really, beginning of fall, winter. So it was a very huge culture shock, as you can imagine. They needed winter clothes, and we tried to tell them not to wear flip-flops and things like that. So there was a lot of work to be done, and the social service agencies really only provide help for up to 90 days. And then they expect people to just, get on with their life, which is impossible for this particular group of people. So it took us about 5-6 years to really get everybody in a situation that they felt good, independent and able to, go to school, go to work, and things like that. So now RAP is really focused on educating, advocating, building a community of the members that are here, and really supporting individuals and families. We do that through our programming that we can talk about a little bit later, where I'll give you an opportunity of how you can support RAP. So I want to talk about the difference between a refugee and an asylee. And a refugee is a person who's outside their country of nationality, and they're unable or are not willing to return to that country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution, usually because of their race or religion, their nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. Whereas an asylee is a person who meets the same definition as a refugee, but they're already here in the United States. So they kind of skip that step of leaving their country to find refuge in a nearby country. And then an immigrant is a person who willingly leaves their country and enters another country so that they can get permission to permanently resettle, and which qualifies them to work. And then, of course, a migrant is kind of a broad term of a person who's either moving from place to place within their own country, or they're moving from country to country without an intent really of becoming a permanent resident. So let's get down to what we really want to talk about today. Why are there refugees from Burma? And there's a long history of civil wars and military rule in Burma ever since they became independent from the British colonial rule, which was in 1948. So I want to share a short history of Burma's government power and how it's led to this crisis and other crises in the past. So while the country was in transition from like 1948 till 1962, it was fairly peaceful. People were working towards a democracy of some sort. But in 1962, there was a military coup, and the military took over, wanting to basically turn the government into more of a socialistic government, we'll say. And then in 1988, while that was still going on, there was a movement that was caused by the people finally deciding that they really didn't like the way the military was running the government, basically, and they were hoping to go towards a more democratic leadership. And so there were these protests happening, just like they are now, under the leadership of Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the National League of Democracy creator, basically. Her father had been assassinated at the end of the war back in the 1940s. And so she kind of took on his leadership in the country. But during these protests, about 3,000 people were killed. And because of that, many people were fled outside the country to avoid being killed or avoid being persecuted, just, for being against the government, we'll say. The next year, in 1989, the military changed the name from Burma to Myanmar. In their words, they thought it was to emphasize change and progress. But in reality, it was really just to change the name so that the military had more power. That leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, was silenced, and she was put under house arrest for 15 years. After she was released in 2010, Aung San Suu Kyi, she resumed her fighting for democracy. And they had an election in 2015, and she won under the National League of Democracy. In that vote, the decision was that the country would be run by a civilian leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, and also a military leader, which at that time was Chief Min Aung Hlaing. The civilian leaders had about 75% power, and the military had about 25% power. But the military, because there was a constitution in 2008, was also given control of like 3 ministries, which was Home Affairs, Defense, and Border Affairs. So all this is happening, and then in 2017, the Rohingya crisis hit, we'll say. In August of 2017, Rohingya militants attacked police at a post in the Rakhine State. The Rakhine State is where all the Rohingya people live in Burma. And the response to that attack, which was very small, by security forces, prompted the military to carry out what they called a clearance operation. And the clearance operation, really what their intent was to destroy the entire Rakhine State and get rid of the Rohingya people that were living in Burma. Now, the Rohingya people have been living in Burma for hundreds of years, but they've never been considered citizens of Burma. They live in Rakhine State. They're not allowed to work outside of Rakhine State. They don't have any voting rights. They're just kind of this lost group of people. And on top of that, they are Muslim in a Buddhist country. So while this clearance operation was happening, when she was questioned about the operation, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the president, rejected allegations that there was a genocide going on when she appeared in court in December of 2019. The military troops, the soldiers, destroyed villages, and they still are today. By burning them down, they gang raped women and girls, murdering thousands of people, including children, including elderly, including disabled people, and basically forced about 1 million people to be displaced, either within Burma or outside of Burma in neighboring countries like Bangladesh or Malaysia. 60% of those refugees are children. Right now, there are more than 1 million refugees living in Bangladesh refugee camps, which is the world's largest and most densely populated refugee camp today. The UN Commissioner of Refugees describes the Rohingya refugee crisis as the most urgent refugee emergency in the world. So I'm showing you this map because this is the Rakhine State. As you can see, is the northwest coast. it made sense for the Rakhine to flee into Bangladesh. Also, others tried to escape by boat, some of them landing in this little small group of islands, some of them coming into Malaysia or Indonesia. Unfortunately, some of them, well, many of them perished in that journey. And the ones that made it sometimes were rejected by those countries and not allowed in. So they were left on the shores of those countries, either or staying in their boat. And that's still happening today. If you can read deep into the news, when we can get some news out of there. The other theory, there is a theory, and it's not the truth yet, but there's a theory that China has been working with the military in Burma, paying them a lot of money to basically carry out this genocide of the Rohingya people, so that it can make way for a pathway for their trading, so that they can have access to this coast over here. Again, it has not been proven, but it is a theory by some people that have come out of the Rakhine state. So carrying on with our history, in 2020, Burma had another election. And again, Aung San Suu Kyi won. That election was in November of 2020. And as we know, or maybe you don't, February 1st, 2021, the military had a military coup once again. That was on February 1st. And so the military leaders believed that the vote was a fraud and that they actually won, but they had no proof, no evidence. And so they created this military coup and they took over the government overnight. Once again, Aung San Suu Kyi and her supporters have been placed under house arrest, which is where they are now. Burma was put in a state of emergency for at least 1 year. And the country is pretty much closed to the rest of the world. Reporters, social media is cut off, internet is very rare. Family and friends that are here in the United States or other places in the world can't really communicate at all with their family. So it's they're kind of closed everybody out. And so we really don't know a whole lot of, important information that we should know. Of course, following that coup, almost immediately, there became this peaceful protests. Peaceful meaning that people were just gathering to protest the military coup, military taking over. They wanted their Aung San Suu Kyi back. They wanted democracy back. So, as you can see, these are large crowds. Hundreds of thousands of people in many cities were protesting. And unfortunately, those peaceful protests became violent because the military started to fight back, basically, or put them back in their place, I should say. The military has been using guns, grenades, helicopter shootings into crowds, airstrikes, home raids, and oftentimes they will come in the middle of the night and take family members of people that they think are supporting this civilian disobedient movement and detain them and torture them until they tell them where these people are. The civilian disobedient movement is really part of the protest where, professional people that are working have gone on strike, doctors and teachers and, hospital workers, transportation workers. They won't work because they want to go out and protest, and they refuse to work because they want to kind of make an economic impact or make some kind of impact so that they will be heard. And there's also this other thing where people are not buying products that are made by the military. So there's this huge economic impact. In the meantime, the military is continuing their violence against the protesters. And as of May 7th of this year, a few days ago, really, 769 protesters, bystanders, which 44 were children. That number I'm sure, has gone up and is not accurate. But those are the numbers that have been killed by the military or police forces. And about 4,000 are being detained. And people that are being detained are being tortured, and many of them have died in custody. So what is the United States doing about this, right? The United States, for the past, since 2017 or whatever, we pretty much have done nothing. The world kind of hasn't really paid a lot of attention to what's going on in Burma, with this genocide going on, until this particular coup happened, brought attention back. So Joe Biden acknowledged, at least, that the United States was taking steps to prevent the generals from improperly having access to $1 billion in Burmese government funds. So he's ordered a freeze on assets and sanctions to military leaders. And he stated, as protests grow, violence against those asserting their democratic rights is unacceptable. And we're going to keep calling it out. The people of Burma are making their choices heard, and the world is watching. Sorry. So once again, because of these protests and because of the military violence against the protesters, people are leaving. They're, getting out of the country. And unfortunately, the countries that they are fleeing to, which is Thailand again and India, some of them are turning them away. They're at the border, so they're forced back into their country. They don't want to go back home, so they're forced to just kind of be displaced, living in the jungles and things like that. So, today's numbers of refugees in the world, because of all this violence and turmoil around the world, there are 80 million forcibly displaced people in the world. About 45 million of them are internally displaced, which means they have nowhere to go. About 26 million are refugees, 4 million are asylum seekers, and then there's this other group of Venezuelan displaced people abroad. So of those 80 million forcibly displaced people, 1.5 million are coming from Burma. And of those 1.5 million people from Burma, about 370,000 are still within the country. And that's probably higher because we really don't know where people are. So it's hard to get to some areas in that country. And then there's still, even since the first round in 1980s, there's still about 92,000 refugees in Thailand. And those are growing because people are trying to get out. And then, of course, 884 in Bangladesh, which is up to about 1 million now. And then another 150,000 in Malaysia. So what is the United States doing to help refugees from Burma who are looking to resettle? Again, for the past 4 years, we've done nothing because we're really not allowing refugees in the country. And our refugee cap is the smallest it's ever been, ever. So the refugee resettlement cap is determined by the President of the United States. So the number of refugees that can come into the United States each year is set by the President in consultation with Congress. But that has to occur before October 1st of that fiscal year. So a fiscal year goes from October to September. This is a short, like a history from 2011 to 2021, showing the cap by each president. And at the 110,000 in 2017 was set by President Obama in 2016 in October. So you can see immediately when Trump came into power, into presidency, he lowered each year, lowered that number to, in 2021, to 15,000. He set that 15,000 in October of 2020. When President Biden took office in January, shortly after, he revised that cap to 62,500. That's been fairly recent. I think it was just a couple of weeks ago. And he also has proposed into 2021 that, as of October, 125 refugees will be allowed. And those are refugees from all over the world. Those are not just from Burma. So that's if you think about the number of refugees from Burma there are, that's really just like a drop in the bucket. But hopefully we can get some of those people here. So what can you do to help here in Worcester? With the refugee cap opening up, we hope to get more refugees from Burma in the United States, and hopefully here in Worcester. Worcester has a lot of great resources for refugees here. And one of the best ways that you could help is really get involved. One of the things RAP does is we accept volunteers and interns. We've always had great volunteers from Clark University, and a few of our board members are Clarkies, and so we really appreciate anyone who gives their time to help refugees. Our programs are everywhere from education, homework help, one-to-one mentorships, things like that. I like this picture because it shows it's 4 of 5 of the ethnic minority groups that have come here from Burma. So from left to right, she is Burmese Muslim, and then the next one is Karen, and the next one is Rohingya, and the next one is Karenni. And then we also have Chin people. And they all 5 of them all speak different languages. Very, very few refugees actually speak Burmese. And other than volunteering, of course, donate money or do fundraising. All of the money that RAP gets to help people here in Worcester is through personal donations, through fundraising, and through local grants. So we do not get any money from the state or federal government or anything like that. So there's lots of ways you can donate, either through PayPal or Venmo. Create a fundraiser, do something on campus or in your community to raise awareness of what's going on in Burma and how we can help here in Worcester. And then of course use Amazon Smile, click on Worcester Refugee, and believe it or not, we get pretty good amount of money from people doing that. So it's an easy way to support. And I just want to go back to the family that you met, Pawa. Today, Pawa has adopted a young disabled girl from the refugee camps in Thailand, and she brought her here. Puku, her husband, is still working full-time, and he supports the family. The 2 oldest boys, Alo and Ado, go to Worcester State University. And like Pawa said, she wanted to get an education and help the people. One of them is looking to go into social work, and one of them is looking into being a police officer. And then the younger son is graduating from high school this year, and he participates in our youth group. And Pawa continues to work on her English, and she works with a one-on-one mentor, writing and reading English. The 2 boys that are in college were given scholarships from RAP, and they also came to our college prep courses, like classes that help them with their college essay and help them with financial aid and all those things. So just even this one family really has benefited from the work of RAP and the volunteers and the donations from everyone. So I encourage you to, I hope that you've had some questions while I've been talking. If you have anything you want to talk to me personally about, or you want to reach out to volunteer, or have questions about internships, you can reach me, and I will gladly personally respond to you. So at that, I will open it up for questions, comments, and anything else.
All right, thank you, Lesa. So we have a question from the audience from Emma. So she's wondering, have these immense fluctuations in refugee caps impacted RAP's work/ability to secure funding?
Yes, the last few years have been very, very difficult, not just for RAP, but for all the social service agencies, because there's no refugees coming in. Many of the grants and people that use federal funding or state funding has been cut dramatically, because they don't think that there's a need for refugee funding. However, there really is, as you can see, here we are 10, 12 years later, we're still helping refugees in Worcester because they don't stop needing help. And there's always something new. Like now we have people that are, wanting to maybe buy a house, or, adults maybe want to go to college or whatever, and they still need that guidance and resources to help them with that. So yeah, we really were impacted dramatically. Thankfully, our donors and local grants, like from local banks and things, really stepped up to support us.
Gotcha. And then I guess I'm just wondering, sorry, is that me? I'm wondering how COVID specifically has impacted like refugee camps and like the specific situation going on in Burma, as well as how it's affected your work here in Worcester.
No, I was just reading an article about COVID in Bangladesh in the camps, and surprisingly, it's not that bad, which is shocking because it's packed. People are, living in a tiny, small space. But the country of Burma and Thailand, my friend, one of the founders, who now lives in Thailand, has said that COVID is really bad there right now. It's almost come full circle back to, being bad again. But as far as here, it's been a challenge, like for everybody else, because all of our work has always been done in person. And oftentimes, I would visit homes, and the kids would all get together to do activities, and the youth would get together for activities, and all of that came to a halt. And so we are still doing everything virtual, but it really does put a damper on everything, especially this year with the kids being virtual in school all day. The last thing that they want to do is go virtual at night, with somebody helping them with homework or reading or things like that. But I give them a lot of credit. I think the kids have really thrived. We had a big celebration because we had nine or 10 kids that made the honor roll. Even during this, crazy time, they're, trugging along, and I and volunteers, really proud of that. And we celebrate those successes, but we're hoping to go back to some sort of in-person programs outdoors because the summer's coming, and yay, finally.
Gotcha. And then we have questions. So we have someone asking, what are the estimated number of refugees Worcester is likely to accept in the 2020 fiscal year when we accept a significantly increasing number of refugees into the country?
So each city has the right or the authority to say, yes, I want to take refugees, or no, I don't want to take refugees. Worcester has always said yes to taking refugees. I don't have a number. I don't have that information, like how many will be coming in, but I'm sure that Worcester will be one of the cities in Massachusetts. There's other large populations in Lowell and in the Springfield area, and some in Boston too, but those are the three main cities that take refugees in Massachusetts. So I know that our city government would definitely approve bringing some more in. And we're set up for it. We have the ability to take in more. The only thing that I see, especially now with refugees, living in Worcester, is the housing is quite a challenge. It's very expensive, and there's very little low income housing available. And even people that are living in Worcester now, like the refugees that live in like a 3-decker apartment or whatever, their rent is going up, and it's not affordable. I do see that as an issue.
And then question asking, what aspects of life do refugees find most difficult in the United States?
Definitely speaking the language and understanding the language. It's such a challenge. I mean, I can't imagine going to Burma and learning their language. And it's because it's a totally different alphabet. It's just totally, totally different. But also when they first came, I should say, just the craziness of living in urban life, right? You come from a a bamboo hut in, your lovely village to coming to downtown Worcester with the noise and the people and so much happening, and it's so confusing. And I think that was a big, big challenge for them, they were afraid to leave their house and, to cross the street, like Pawa said. It's simple, silly things that we already take for granted that was very, very difficult. It seemed to me that the women adjusted better. I'm not quite sure why. I think many of the women learned English in the camps more than the men. And same with the children. Many of the women worked like in hospitals or schools in the camps. And so they were learning English and teaching English too, because they knew they were going to be resettled. So I find that when new refugees come, if for some reason the women have done, a lot more preparation, I guess, to come here. But now we're having babies born, so our population is growing, especially with the COVID baby boom.
And then can I ask how refugees and migrants in the United States respond to the xenophobia that they have to experience, or racism, and how that impacts the work that you do?
Yeah, especially now with the hate crimes against Asians because of the COVID-19. A lot of people think that the Asians caused COVID and things like that. I noticed that a lot of just being a refugee, having a refugee status alone is what's the word I want to use? People misunderstand that as they're like the takers, like they're just going to live off the government. They came here to, whatever. And it's so untrue. I mean, if you ever get to be friendly with refugees, they are the most willing people, that they want to work. They want to contribute to society. They want to, make a life for themselves here. They want their children to thrive. They, just like everybody else, like every other American. The big challenge right now, though, for I think, is them becoming citizens. For some reason, our government makes it extremely difficult to become a citizen. You have to be able to speak, read, write, and understand English fairly well in order to pass that test. And I find that to be quite challenging. And also, recently they've made it more difficult. So, for example, you had to learn the answers to 100 questions. Now it's more like 140 questions in order to pass this test. And they ask you random questions just out of conversation, like to see how much you learn, how much English you do know. Rather than knowing the answers to the questions, they ask you other questions just to see if you understand the question and can you answer it properly in English. And, the challenge for the older people is that they're illiterate in their own language. So even if they were allowed, an interpreter or something like that, they can't read or write in their own language. So it's a huge challenge, actually, because they're supposed to try and get citizenship when they're here between 5 and 7 years. And some of them have been here 10 or 12 years and still cannot get citizenship. So,
yeah. And then I have a question in the chat. So, going off of that and the language barrier, how do your volunteers end up dealing with that language barrier with refugees specifically?
Yeah, so a lot of I would say 98% of the children speak English, right? Some of them were born here. Some of them were born in the refugee camps where they learned English. It's the early adults, like in their 20s, that have broken English, and then the parents that struggle to speak and understand English. But you can get by there's a lot of different ways to communicate, a lot of sign language, and the kids end up interpreting for their parents. I know everybody knows that, but it's really awful that they have to do that, but they do. We've always stressed that it's very important to learn English. It's the most important thing they can do when they get here, just to make their own life easier, And we also stress that they should maintain their cultural, practices. The food and the language should remain in the household as long as they can learn some English to get by, get a job, go to school, things like that. But most volunteers are pretty flexible. They, just like when I started, I didn't even know what a refugee was. I didn't even know where Burma was. And so you kind of learn as you go along, how to communicate, I guess.
Thank you. And then, am I making like a rustling noise? Is my audio coming strange? No? Okay.
I don't hear it.
Back. And then we have a question on genocide specifically. So why do you think that other nations around the world have been so hesitant to call the Rohingya genocide a genocide? And how does that relate to what's going on now?
Yeah. I don't know. I can't imagine how anybody could not call it a genocide. There's so many reports that people have done the last few years interviewing refugees in Bangladesh. All the stories are extremely similar, that they were just randomly, a genocide means that you purposefully are trying to kill a certain group of people for whatever reason it is. They haven't done anything wrong, right? And so there's this aerial footage of Rakhine State, and it shows before and after pictures, and before these, lush green villages, and within months, it's been completely gone and flattened to make it look like it never existed. And so there are mass burials, mass graves of people, and the people that survived, like I said, in the refugee camps, explain. There were 2,000 people that were interviewed, and every single one of them explained the same thing: that their soldiers would come into their home, they would either burn their house down, they would rape the women, they would take some of the men as soldiers or kill them if they didn't think they were good enough. I mean, it was just, there's no question. I don't understand why it hasn't been declared a genocide. I don't even know who. There was one country, and I can't remember the name of the country. I should have looked it up before today, that did file charges against the Burmese government. And that is supposed to be, that'll be a long road ahead of us. But it's clearly a genocide, and for Aung San Suu Kyi to deny that was a bad move on her part, I think. She lost a lot of supporters.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then how do you think nationalism plays into patterns of genocide? As it relates to this. So, from that question, I'm just talking about where we see these, examples of genocides and mass murders. It often relates to when coming from a government setting, it often relates to movements of nationalism and strong fascist movements in a lot of cases. And I'm wondering how that relates to Burma specifically.
I read a few articles about some of the military soldiers that left, that defected, I guess the word is. And these people that are in the military are completely brainwashed. It's like this, like you said, like this movement, this power, this almost kind of like the Holocaust, mentality of what they're trying to do is create a country that is completely run by the military, but also everybody's on the same level. Like they don't want these minority groups there. They're just in the way, and they don't want Muslims or Christians. The Christians are, most of the people that came here as refugees were converted to Christianity, I mean. And then you have this whole kind state that are Muslim. So it's this building up of this facade of trying to get their country back to being this rich country. At one point, it was an extremely wealthy, if not the wealthiest country in Asia. And now it isn't. And so I think it's just this mentality of power over the people. I don't really know. I don't really have an answer there.
All right, thank you. And then we have one final question. So you shared a Venn diagram about RAP's programs, and they'd love to hear you talk more about your programs and about advocacy specifically.
Right. One of the things that actually Clark sponsored a program today. It was called Share the Platform, I think it was called. Anita Fabos was part of that. It was excellent. I was part of it today, but I think that really made sense to me, that what we're advocating for the refugees in Worcester to actually to be empowered to take over RAP. We want the refugees to have that organization for themselves. I'm happy to hand it over to them, and not because I think that they have a lot more to say, or a lot more to do, because they are the refugee. They know more about what they need, more about how they can be helped. And so I'm not sure, I'm not even sure about our mission statement. We've been working on our mission statement because our mission is empowering refugees. And I don't think that that's the right word, because we're not here to empower anyone. We're there to support whatever ideas, whatever goals and dreams that they have. And so RAP is kind of evolving a little bit. But for the most part, helping them get education is a priority. And that's not just the children, the youth, the college kids, it's the adults trying to get their citizenship. It's the elders trying to, not be so lonely in their homes and not leaving their homes. It's just trying to help them know that there's a good life in Worcester, and there's a lot of different resources that they can tap into. So that's what we're really trying to do. I don't want people to think that we're like, holding people's hands and things like that. It's a great community. They're the most peaceful people. They're just a lovely group of people that had unfortunate situation and were forced to be in this situation in Worcester. Many of them are migrating. Many of them are moving to, like Indiana or Iowa, or, more rural areas where they're happier. And there's a lot more refugees in those places. And so we encourage that. We miss them when they go, but so I just want to be clear that RAP is our volunteers really support the refugees in different ways. And a lot of that is education. And so a lot of our volunteers are, college students that go to school in Worcester, or medical students or nursing students. It helps both people. It helps the student learn about refugees and about underserved populations. And it helps the refugees understand, hey, I could be a doctor, I could be a nurse, I could, it gives them possibilities and hope.
I was muted. Well, thank you. If we have any more questions, we're actually coming right up on the hour, so pretty good timing. Thank you so much, Lesa, for joining us and all the work that you've put in. And like Ben said in the chat, everything you do support refugees in our community and strengthen our community as a whole. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed and you learned, and tune back in soon. We'll be hosting more webinars with local community partners that you are welcome to join as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, the opportunity. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you, and I hope you can come join us at RAP yourself.
We hope so. I think it looks really cool.
Okay.
All right. Bye, panelists. Or